Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The New Standard. And as always, we have my partner on crime to my left, Neil Coulong. What's up, Neil, on this frosty Friday morning?
Oh, it's great to be here. Great to be a Friday. Kind of a tough, long night, but definitely a good one to dive into. And this is the right place to do it, right?
Absolutely. And before we jump into the program, I want to send my condolences to the family of Demarius Thomas, wide receiver who passed away yesterday at the age of 33, most famously known in Steeler Nation for the guy who caught the Tebow touchdown in Denver. Tragic loss for a young man who died so suddenly. Hopefully, you know, it's just a tragedy. Hopefully, there was nothing nefarious surrounding his death. But again, condolences to Demarius Thomas, the Denver Broncos, and all the other franchises he played for. Before we jump into the program, you can find the program first on YouTube. Do a search for Lance Williams or Neil Coulong and the New Standard. You'll find the show. Please like and subscribe. Give us a Christmas treat and subscribe to the show and like the program. Also, last but not least, want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Mims Seed Company. But let's jump right into the first segment. And the first segment is Numbers Do Not Lie. And we're going to look on the offensive side of the football. Is there a particular number before I give you mine, Neil, that jumps out to you on the offensive side of the football, meaning the Steelers' offense against the Vikings' defense?
Um, that I think gets a little bit tighter. I would say, to me, probably above anything else, five, the amount of sacks they gave up, which happened in one half in one series last night. They've not given up five sacks since 2014. That's how long ago that was. And the 2014 offensive line was vastly superior to the one that they have right now. This goes to show it is not just about the talent that's on your offensive line. You can't just draft your way into great protection. You need to have schematically, you need to have things working on a game-to-game level, and I think that's what the Steelers are struggling with right now. And it obviously did not work very well last night, and it's kind of a microcosm of everything that's been happening to them this year. I think it really kind of boiled over last night. A very poor game in terms of protection from a schematic perspective, more so than a talent one.
I think when you look at Thursday games, I think why they're especially tough is you have a limited amount of time to get physically prepared, and you have a limited amount of time to scheme up anything or to prepare your football team to play on Thursdays. Now, especially as a visiting team and you're traveling. Now, the coaching staff will never use that as an excuse, and they shouldn't. But I think what you're talking about really shows up in a short preparation period. The inconsistency, the inexperience, that really shows up. And you could clearly see that on the offensive side of football, hell, both sides of the football, in the first half, they clearly were not ready. They were clearly not ready to play. Let me ask you about that really quickly before we jump into another number that you may not have, and before I jump into mine. Um, how much do you put on it being a very short week, them having a travel day, and them not really getting started until that second half? Do you think it was more of that, or do you think they actually maybe found something on the offensive side of football in the second half that they could key on and attack, uh, in terms of this Minnesota Vikings defense?
Not to paraphrase Mike Tomlin. In fact, I haven't even heard his comments. I'm not sure if he said this, but I would describe the first half mostly as Steelers beating Steelers. I mean, they made a ton of mistakes all over the offensive unit. I think really the second half, minus some stuff here and there. Most of it was a combination of the Steelers finally getting into what they wanted to do and what they can do well against not a great defensive team. They regressed to the mean. I think they got back to who they were offensively. They were able to make some plays. I think the Vikings helped them out a bit as well. Minnesota had a hand in kind of helping Pittsburgh go back into it. That I'm looking for his name and I can't find it. But I wish the Steelers went against Chris Boyd more often. He was terrible, almost as bad as Cam Sutton was for the Steelers last night. both teams, I think, are in similar places, and I'm not surprised. What we really saw was a tale of two halves, and I think Pittsburgh got to their half mostly by just not making drive killing mistakes the way that they did. They finally gave some protection. The quarterback got rid of the ball on time, and their receivers battled to get open a little bit better. I thought the receiving group in particular was terrible in the first half. I'd imagine they heard about that at halftime. Leading into the second half, you saw a lot more fire out of them. And with that, they got back to probably where they should have been. Now it came down to it's one drive, one play too late, but they adjusted well to themselves. They weren't screwing up nearly as much in the second half overall, I think, than they did in the first. And Ben threw a pick on an early drive in the second half. They had to overcome that even. And they still did to make it, pretty competitive at the end. So overall, I don't know schematically. I was able to watch some of it back this morning. I didn't have a whole lot of time. I got up a little bit later than I wanted to, but you saw them really, I think, just shore up fundamental things in the second half. I don't think there were any wholesale changes that they implemented. I think really just they threw the ball well. They were much more efficient, and they capitalized on a few mistakes from the Vikings defense down the way.
I'm going to give you a number, and I got a couple of general questions or talking points that I think we should hit before we jump into the defensive side of football. I'm going to give you a positive number, and I think it's the 94 yards, the 4.7 yards per carry from Najee Harris. I think, and I want to give some kudos to Najee Harris. His running style is very violent. He takes a lot of hits. He is not the type of back that tries to avoid contact. I've been really impressed with the fact that his body is still pretty electric and is still pretty fresh. Overall, I think he had a pretty good game, one of his better games. And that 4.7 yards per carry with the long run of 23 is something that you don't see from Najee Harris. I think as he moves forward as a player, I would love if he could pop a few of those, maybe 15 to 17. He's never going to be a guy that's going to take it to the house. He's going to be a guy to hit you for 2, 2, 6, 7, 2, 3, 3, 8. He's going to be that type of guy, and it's going to be a war of attrition, and he's going to get his 100 yards there in that way. But I thought it was impressive by the offensive line, at least in the second half, in regards to how they ran the ball. And if you can get this Najee on a consistent basis, I think this is the Najee Harris that the Steelers are looking for. Now let's flip-flop it. Let me go and give you another offensive number that I thought stood out in terms of Najee Harris. He also had 3 receptions on 3 targets for 1 touchdown. Do you have any other offensive numbers in terms of the numbers don't lie segment that you want to look at in regards to this game?
I was going to point out Najee as well, and I'll add to what you just said. He had 17 yards at the half. He finished with 94, and that was a highly on one hand, you can say the Steelers were looking to throw the ball. The Vikings were playing back. Yes, that's true. But really the point is, and I've been saying this about Najee, he's not a breakaway player. He's not going to be a big play production back. And to some degree, I think that limits him. And that was my main concern with him coming out. It's not that he's not a solid 3-down player, which is what I think the Steelers really wanted to draft. They didn't want a high upside guy that they had to work on. They wanted a guy that can get in there and play and do the basic things right away, which is really Harris's wheelhouse. What I'm saying essentially is that Harris's ceiling is not all that high. What we're seeing of him now is kind of the best we're going to see of him. And it has value in situations like last night. He was able to fight through what they were giving him in the second half and get, instead of 3, he can pull 7. Instead of a 0 run, he can get 2 or 3 out of it. He's going to do that. He's not going to pull away from anybody though. And I think we see that in a game like this. His numbers ended up being, we're generally happy with it. He had a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown, right? We're happy with that. Those types of plays that he can make when he's being set up underneath. Generally speaking, though, his numbers were not consistent throughout the entire game. The first half, he was basically non-existent, and he was making plays along with everybody else in the second half. So to me, I think it shows the polarizing level of Harris's production and what we can expect from him. I would say this, though, to add to it, and this is why I would bring him up. You look at Dalvin Cook after a week off. Dalvin Cook, keep in mind, I hate to bring this up because I'm sick and tired of dealing with this question, but Dalvin Cook was a second-round pick. He's a game-breaking player. Now, the Steelers honestly looked like they were throwing the game early as far as how bad their run fits were, but Cook exploited that. He can pull away from guys. He can make plays in all phases of the game as well. He is a complete all-around back. He's one of the best in the NFL. If Harris wants to get to that level, he's going to have to cut some weight. He's going to have to get quicker. He's going to have to get faster, and maybe he can do that. But all I'm saying is he didn't do it at Alabama. I don't see how he's going to do that in the NFL. So we saw decent things from Harris, but we also saw him playing at his ceiling for where he is right now.
I would agree with that. And, not even to use Dalvin Cook as a comp, but I think that's a good comp in terms of a complete back. I'll just use someone in his class, his draft class, is Javonte Williams. I mean, Javonte Williams is more of an explosive player. He's more of an explosive player. And if you watch Javonte Williams' performance against the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think Najee Harris is that type of runner and can have that type of performance. Double H is hilarious. And Double H wrote, "The melanin deficient curtain failed to defend blades of grass last night."
Hey, that was a team effort, guys.
Yes, anybody
was any good last night in the first half. Nobody was good.
Let's jump into,
or otherwise. No, they were all bad.
Let's jump into another couple of questions. The first one before we jump into the bigger one. And I want to get to this one because I want to lay out a little bit and let you rant. We're going to get on an early morning Neil rant. Neil's going to go off. So I'm going to set that up. But the first thing I want to ask, I looked at the highlights a couple of times. First of all, I thought the throw to Freiermuth from Ben on the last play was his best throw of the year.
We're going to miss that.
And I thought that was And I thought that was one of the best throws that a quarterback has made this year. That's a tight window throw.
You can't make that throw. You just can't. It's absolutely impossible. I can't believe that it landed where it landed. He put it. Sorry, Lance, I'm cutting you off here. I'm just so excited about it. A football coach friend of mine texted me after the game. Ben put that ball on a mosquito's dick, and I honestly think that's the best way to describe it. There was no room in there. He split 3 guys on he didn't have another option. That was the throw. That's either getting picked off or getting it knocked down incomplete. Probably 5 out of 100 that's completed. An incredible throw. I mean, it's everything that you hope to see at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career. A player who put everything on the field last night and was getting absolutely no help from anybody. Great second half when guys started, playing along with him, following his lead. It doesn't get better than that throw. And it's a shame that, unfortunately, a Hall of Fame level safety is there to make an incredible play on his right. Give Harrison Smith credit for that, but an incredible throw. Absolutely.
That was my question, because I'm hearing on the chat, you got some guys on the chat that's saying that Freiermuth dropped it or not. So Double H wrote on the chart that Freiermuth not holding on to that catch is karma payback for Mark Andrews not holding on to his. But our tight end's catch was going to be much harder. I don't think he missed it. I thought it got dislodged. That was going to be my question. I thought I looked at it.
Clearly it did. Freiermuth had the ball in his hand. This is one problem that we have with StreamYard here, Lance. We need to be able to put images up. I snapped a pic of this for social media just for the sake of showing it. But the ball is in Freiermuth's hand. He did everything right. Harrison Smith is right there about to hammer the ball out. I mean, he didn't get time to catch it. The defender made a great play. That's all it was. The window in which he had to throw that was so ridiculously narrow. It was the only thing that Smith was going to be able to do, and he did it. He made the play. He won. He's a competitor. Are you able to put stuff in the comments, Lance? Because I can't for some reason. I'm putting my tweet. I'm putting my tweet into our private chat. Put that into the comments.
I will.
You look at that picture. Smith is right on the play. He's right on the ball, and he knocks it loose. That's not a drop. Freiermuth didn't have, if and you can't ask for this, but if Freiermuth had an extra quarter second to secure it, Steelers are going for 2 to win that game. It's that simple. So that's absolutely not on the level of Andrews. It's not a karmic thing at all. The fact that they're tight ends is the only real comparison between those two plays.
Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up because I was like, when I saw Double H's comments, I was like, I'm pretty certain when they showed it about 10 times that it got dislodged 10 times.
He
I
knocked it
was
out. He clearly knocked
Yeah,
it out.
yeah. I was trying to think like maybe on the ninth out of the 10th time that they showed it, it didn't get dislodged, but 10 out of 10 is pretty much 100%. And I'm 100% certain and sure that it got dislodged. We'll try to do the I'll put the link on YouTube in the comments if you're listening to see the link, because I guess the link is pretty long and it showed up on a couple of comments, so it's not going to work. Here's my other question. What let me just lay out here and let you get to it. And I'm gonna just ask this. What's wrong with Chase Claypool?
That's laying it out for sure.
Like what's wrong with Chase? Like, does he not know time and situation?
He
Like,
clearly didn't. He clearly didn't. I don't care what his excuse is. He clearly didn't. And I was yelling about Claypool earlier on in the game. This is the problem with him, and this has been the problem with him all season long. In my opinion, I'm not there. I'm not speaking to him. I'm not hearing this from anybody else. I'm just really kind of connecting the dots here. So take it for what it is. I don't see how his actions can be the result of a professional who shows up to work, does his job, improves his game, and plays for his teammates. I don't see that. You can't tell me he's doing the things that he's doing if his focus is on the game and not himself. There is absolutely no reason to kneel and preen and point out a first down in that situation. And on top of that, Lance, here's my thing. Trey Turner came over and grabbed the ball from him like Claypool was an 8-year-old. Okay? You don't just do that. You have to earn that if you're Chase Claypool. That's the level of respect that Claypool
right.
gets from his teammates. Find me a moment in which that's happened.
Let
You
me say
won't.
it this way. Let me say it this way and get back to it, Neil. Is they've seen it too much.
Yes, exactly. They know that he's going to do this. They're watching for it. It happened in a terrible moment for it to happen. There is no reason for Claypool doing that. You don't need me to tell you that. Everybody knows that. But the fact that that Turner is situation aware enough to go over and say, you need to knock it off. I don't trust that you can do this on your own. I have to do this for you. That is the ultimate alpha move. If you're looking, if you have no respect for somebody as a man, that's the kind of thing you're going to do. And I say that because that's the kind of thing you do to your kid.
It,
You
it,
know,
it,
that's an insult to Claypool, and he earned it. So what does Claypool do? He fights back. That causes the ball to pop loose. They don't set the ball in place, and they wasted 4 seconds. It's an embarrassment. He made a great play down the sideline, which is really weird because times he focuses, he makes plays on balls in the air. There are other times that he clearly doesn't. He's not in good position. He's not balanced, and he doesn't make the play. The level of inconsistency that he has is something that I expect of a rookie, which goes back to what I've been saying about Claypool. He has not improved from last year. I can't have that on my team. You're a second-year guy with no playmakers on your offensive team. You need to step up and be a dude on this offense. And Claypool can't do it. I don't care what his stats were at the end of the game. Claypool was damaging to this team top to bottom. You remember earlier in the game, he fumbles after a play.
Yes.
And which, frankly, I'm not going to get into to rules of instant replay. That's garbage. The guy called it on the field. The call should stand. It's just, I'm not going to get into it. The next play, for whatever reason, Matt Canada decides Chase Claypool is the guy who's going to block the force on the play, right? He wasn't even the force. He's the backside defender. You have to cut that guy off. You know how easy it is for a 6'5", 240-pound wide receiver to get in the way of an NFL defensive back? That was an Eric Ebron level block. And Claypool blew it, completely blew it. So not only did they not convert 3rd and 1 on a play that should have converted on 3rd and 1, they lost 3 yards. And that's solely because of Claypool. That was on the next play after he fumbled. Sit his ass on the bench. I'm done with the guy. I'm absolutely done with him. I can't have guys like that on my team. That's just me. I honestly think they're going to try to trade him this offseason, and they'll get something for him.
I don't think they're going to try to trade him. I think they're mad at him. I think they have reached their limit. But I think his pedigree of being a second round pick will get him through his rookie contract. But it's tough love time. It's tough love time, and he's going to get it. And when Trey Turner snatched the ball, this is what I thought in my head:
It's
"Give me
bad.
the damn ball, dummy."
Yeah.
That
Yes,
that like
exactly. That's
that's
exactly what
exactly
he's
what
saying.
Trey Turner.
That's a
Give me the.
pro player. That's a freaking
It's,
embarrassment.
what are you
Can,
doing? Give me the damn ball.
can we get into this really quickly? I'm sorry. The bare suggestion that Chase Claypool is doing anything like Antonio Brown is ridiculous. There is absolutely nothing that you could say that suggests that Antonio Brown would have done something like that in that situation. Don't even tell me that, okay?
No, I think
Antonio
what
Brown
he's
got
saying.
160 targets a year for 7 years and was an all-pro player. He
No,
would have
no, I
made
don't think
every
he's
play that
saying.
Claypool
No,
did.
I'm thinking what he's saying is Claypool, and let me describe it this way. And thank you, Smacked Out 98, for the comment. Is Claypool plays like he's cute, like somebody told him he was cute, right? He cares about his brand. I think he cares a lot about how it looks and how he looks, as opposed to consistently playing quality football like a professional. It's all about him. It's all about the spotlight being on Chase Claypool, because that's the only way and the only reason, unless you're just so situationally unaware that you celebrate in that moment, that it's totally about him and me.
Antonio Brown's production is his brand. Okay.
Yes,
I don't care if
yes.
he points out a first down. You guys have problems with that. Fine. Get used to it. That's the NFL. Okay. You can't tell me that just because they make the same celebration moment that they're only about making it about themselves. The difference is Claypool doesn't produce anything. Antonio Brown earned the right to celebrate, and he did it every snap of every game. The guy busted his ass for this team. I can't believe the level of negative attention that he gets overall. Like he's just written out of history because of some stupid things that he did at the end, which frankly were not on the field issues. When he was on the field, he was all about business and he made plays. Chase Claypool can't carry Antonio Brown's jock, and that is the most unnecessary thing I'm going to say today. Not even close. Don't even try to compare the two. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And let's do this. Let's switch to the defensive side of football. And before I do that, and let's jump into some numbers don't lie on that side of the ball. And let me jump into this comment from Steelers Freak. And I just died laughing when I saw this. When Steelers Freak said the steel curtain has now become aluminum drapes. Let me give you a number that clearly stands out. Delvin Cook, 27 attempts, 205 yards, 7.6 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. That stat line,
167 at the half.
that stat line is the number. And thanks to my brother who sent me the graphic this morning, that number is the third most all time against the Pittsburgh Steelers, behind Fred Taylor and OJ Simpson. Neil,
Fred Taylor.
it's and I watched that game. Quick note, quick history. I watched that game when Fred Taylor killed the Steelers in a Raider bar by myself as the only Steeler fan with the Steeler jersey on. And
Which one? Fred Taylor had like
uh,
4 of those games.
and the only reason I didn't get harassed in that bar is because they thought I was crazy. Big up to the Golden Bear. Anybody from the Bay Area listening to the show remembers the Golden Bear, because I was representing. They were like, he must be crazy. He's the only Steeler fan in a bar of 250 to 300 Raider fans ringing the bell, yelling Raiders after every single run. And I was still in there just with I was just watching proudly like a Steeler
Fred
fan.
Taylor
So
didn't
what?
play for the Raiders.
Oh,
He killed us with the Jaguars.
that's right. That's right. Well, that story was all for
Same
nothing
difference.
then.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of instances that you watched a Steelers game at a Raiders bar and they were all over you because, well,
Yes.
you haven't beat the Raiders in 20 years.
Yes. I don't know why I thought Fred Taylor was on. I don't know. Anyway, he killed the Steelers. He never played for the Raiders. Did he play for the
I
Raiders?
don't think so.
Oh, I'm thinking of Charlie Garner.
Garner, yeah, Garner had
I'm thinking
games.
of Charlie Garner.
He did. He played for
I'm
the
thinking of
Niners and the
Charlie Carr.
Raiders.
Yeah, he killed the Steelers well. Hopefully, people will miss the show at 24 minutes and skip over the fact that
We
Fred
can
Taylor
edit.
was a
We can edit,
Jaguar.
can't we?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Everybody
Here
makes mistakes on shows.
to go back though to what we were talking about. They flashed this stat up during the game last night, and it was something to the effect of Mike Tomlin, his coaching career for 232 games, had not allowed a 100-yard rusher
And a half.
individual in a half, and he's done it twice in the last 3 weeks right now. That's how bad the Steelers' run defense has been. You're not supposed to be able to run the ball and dominate a game. That's what all the advanced analytics people tell me. Your running doesn't matter. You shouldn't be able to do this. The Steelers seem to be of that belief as well. They don't really seem to care about the run at all. Their inside linebackers, in my opinion, honestly, they need backup plans for both of them for next year. Neither of them are showing that they can play at the NFL level right now. They don't have anything coming from the defensive line, and there are injuries there. I understand that part, but we warned people about this, Lance. The reps, the load, the effort that Cam Hayward was putting forward because nobody else was is wearing him down. He did not look good last night, and we're going to blame some of this on the fact that it's a Thursday night game, coming off a very physical, very emotional game against their rival. I understand that part of it. They have nobody else playing. Nobody else is playing on that defense, and it literally looked like that in the first half. Some of those, even Troy Aikman was beside himself with how big the lanes were. With all due respect to Dalvin Cook, he's a great back, but it didn't take a Hall of Fame running back to run through lines like that. Their run defense, their fits were high school level. As Mike Tomlin said at halftime, junior varsity. It was that bad. It was absolutely embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, it's hit an all-time low. And I don't think there is a solution on the horizon. And someone in the chat asked about TJ Watt's injury. Have you heard any updates on his injury? I wouldn't think.
Just overexertion. Once again, he plays with no practice the past week, and then he has 3 days to prepare for this one and has to go all out. I'm not surprised. I talked to a friend of mine saying he's probably going to re-injure himself. Keep in mind, he was banged up before he came down with COVID. He had the knee and the knee and hip injury that he was working through before Ravens week. He came down with COVID like right after the Bengals game, and he didn't practice. He said he ran around in his backyard, but that's not the same thing. So he had to go all out against the Ravens, and his body didn't recuperate. So to be honest with you, I'm not surprised. He's beaten up. This is the problem with Thursday night games. It's not even the product on the field Thursday. It's what happens after. Watt, I don't know. He has 10 days, and he knows he needs to get out there. He wants to break the team's single season sack record, I'm sure. He's on track, he was anyway, until last night. To be defensive player of the year. I'm sure that he wants to achieve that. And I think as a team, it's a good thing for him to shoot for. But
let me
he's
say
been hurt
this.
all season.
Let me say this about the defensive player of the year award. He's not going to win it. I wish I had a bell that said ding, 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 ding. For him to win defensive player of the year on a team that is looking like it's going to finish sub 500 and out of the playoffs, he'll have to get 30 sacks. He's not getting defensive player of the year on a team that does not make the playoffs, on a team that's not a good defense.
He's not going to win MVP because of that. He absolutely, leading into last night, he is the league's defensive player of the year. I don't think there's no dispute in my mind. He only played 10 games. He has 16 sacks. He's destroying everybody on a per game basis. And he has the hype of being a runner up 2 years in a row. TJ Watt is the only guy who got votes for defensive player of the year each of the last 2 years. He was second to Donald last year. He was caught in a mix of a bunch of people behind Devin McCourty in 2019. But what he had done up until last night was absolutely worthy of that award. In fact, I'd say he was the front runner. He certainly has, he still has a chance to win it. I don't think it's over by any stretch. Let's see what he does.
I think it's a wrap. I'm going to see, and I challenge anybody out there in the chat to figure it out. We don't have a research department, obviously, but I want to see how many players have won defensive player of the year on losing teams. Because I think just a lot of times when it comes to voting, if you're winning matters, and sometimes you get overvalued on winning teams. And you might not be defensive player of the year. Has he played an excellent season? Absolutely. At this point, I wouldn't give defensive player, offensive player, I wouldn't give any awards to anybody on losing teams. Because for me, if you're
Uh,
not winning, whatever it is, it's just stats. I mean,
I
like in
think
a
you
game,
make a good point, and I'll back off a little bit of what I said because it should be player, but we know that that's not the case. As great as Troy Polamalu was in 2010, if the Steelers weren't who they were, he probably doesn't win that award. In my opinion, from what I recall of it, I'm not prepared to have the argument, but Charles Woodson probably had a better season than Polamalu did in 2010. I believe that was one of Darrelle Revis's big years. I think maybe he deserved it, but they gave it to Polamalu. There's a certain level of career worthiness as well as team function that comes into it. I can't tell you right now if every player who's on here was on a dominant team when they won it, but I will say for the Steelers, one, can anybody name all of them without looking it up? I can. I don't believe any of them, any of the Steelers defensive player of the year were on not winning teams.
I'll give you another reason why I don't think he'll win defensive player of the year. The defense is bad overall.
But
And they, you
he's the
know,
player though. It's not
yeah.
it's
I
not
mean, I
a
get what
team
you're saying,
defensive award.
but it's hard to give defensive player of the year, in my opinion, to a
Plus,
defense that gives up about 26 points a game. I
some
mean,
of their
that's
worst games, Watt didn't play. I mean, there's think of anything that might lend weight to his argument.
I mean,
He was hurt. I think in the third quarter of the Bengals game, that was over. All right, so scratch that one. But
I
he
mean,
didn't
he
play
got
against the
hurt in this
Packers,
game. I
right?
mean, well, I guess he's figured it out, like what games not to play, like
Yeah, he
or
sees it
like
early on and just goes out,
he's
taps
like,
out.
oh
I'm not
well,
wasting it for this.
let me tap out so I can get the defensive player of the year. Anyway, TJ's a hell of a player, whether he gets defensive player of the year or not. But I think that's not it. I think that's besides the point. The Steelers are 6-1. I think their playoff hopes are I think they're pretty much dashed. And I think the Steelers are exactly what their record says they are. I think we've given good explanation as to why they've started off slow, but this is what inconsistent teams look like. And I think it's
Yep.
time. I think it's time. They're going to continue to play Ben Roethlisberger throughout the rest of the season because this is Ben Roethlisberger's victory lap, so to speak. Um, but I think it's a time right now, if you're the coaching staff, this is a time of evaluation for the rest of the roster for a lot of the young guys. Like maybe Luke Glue plays and starts for the rest of the season. It's a time to see where everyone is as a football team. But I want to get into this one thing really quickly. And I was thinking about this football team and about this run for the playoffs. Because I think if any Steeler fan out there thinks the Steelers are a legitimate playoff team, I think they're delusional. But I was thinking of something called Ben Maddox. And Ben Maddox is a spinoff on mathematics. And just looking at Ben Roethlisberger's career as he takes this victory lap, when you look at Ben Maddox, it's a mathematical principle that combines Ben Roethlisberger added to other elements of the football team. And I think when you look at Ben Roethlisberger right now, and you look at this football team, you have an old Ben plus an inconsistent offensive line plus a bad defense equals no chance of the playoffs. I think when the Steelers won in the past, you had Big Ben, or Big Ben was good enough as young Ben, plus an inconsistent offensive line, plus a great D, championship contender. But old Ben, the only way the Steelers could have competed this year with an old Ben was to have an old Ben plus a great offensive line plus a great defense. And I think when you look at Ben Roethlisberger right now, and why I think he knows that it's over and why it should be over is just he physically is not good enough right now to overcome the other deficiencies in this roster. I think that's just where this team is now. There's too many leaks, too many holes, too many deficiencies. And outside of not playing him the rest of the season, and he's going to play the rest of the season, and he should. He's their best option at quarterback. They're just not in a position. They just don't have the other pieces to compete week in and week out, and that's why you see the inconsistency. Do you think moving forward, because I'm trying to do the math in my head real quick, they've played 13 games, they've got 4 more games. Is this evaluation time for the rest of the roster and for yes, the rest of the young guys to try to get a bead on what you have for next year and try to get some of these guys some reps and get some snaps on film in live competition to see how you need to build this roster moving forward?
One, well, my answer to all of this is going to be no. But the idea that this team is eliminated from the postseason right now is flat out false. I mean, this is simply not true. I know that it doesn't look good. I know it was a really tough loss for sure, and I know that people are still stung over the manner in which they've lost the last 3 games that they've lost. But the reality is they're not out yet, and until they're out, they're not going to change anything. And even then, you're still playing for Ben Roethlisberger's legacy. They're not going to just put guys out there. Suggesting otherwise is basically acting as if this is a slow pitch softball team that meets once a week to play, and that's the only thing you have to evaluate. They're meeting with them on a daily basis. They practice, they watch film, they know who's able to play and who isn't. They have a plan that goes out 3 years of what they want to do. There are guys that, yeah, I'm sure are going to get reps here eventually. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I've said that many times. In fact, I'm still right on track for a 7-10, well, almost right on track for a 7-10 season. They're not at the point where they have to give up. If you are still mathematically alive for a playoff berth and you have 6 wins, and that's probably going to put them 9 or 10 in the AFC when there's 7 spots left in the AFC that's been completely up and down all season. No, you're not quitting yet. You have to beat Tennessee next week. But until that happens, they're not going to go into let's play all the young guys as if they haven't been doing that all year. they're the youngest offense in the NFL. Their core guys, the guys that they want as part of their future, by and large, are playing already. The guys who aren't capable to play. For whatever reason, Dan Moore is still out there. I think that's for the most part because Dan Moore proved that he's somebody they want to invest long-term in. But outside of that, there aren't guys that they just threw into the fire over somebody who's better. I think that this has been their plan the entire time, and they're going to see it through. But that also accomplishes exactly what you're saying, Lance. It's more reps for the guys that are young that need to develop. It's just that's their current team. That's why they're not very good. They're really young.
As you say it, as I said my point and you say your point, it's funny how we've taken a left and right turn and end up at the same point.
Yeah, it's a matter of how we're describing it.
Yes, they're doing it anyway. I mean, they're doing it anyway because the roster is so young.
For the comment here, if Kendrick Green isn't the answer at center, I guarantee bleeping to you that BJ Finney isn't either. So what do? You keep playing Kendrick Green. You try to get him to improve. That's what coaches do. That's their job. Okay. Let's see what happens over 4 games. He's a rookie taken in the 3rd round who primarily played guard last season. If any of you thought he was going to step in and be dominant, I don't know what to tell you. Why they drafted him, why they passed on the immortal Creed Humphrey, we'll never know. We know that Creed Humphrey went late 2nd round. We know the Steelers got the good tight end that they needed. They didn't draft Creed Humphrey, okay?
Creed's number
they drafted
PFF.
Yeah, exactly. We all hate PFF, but we all worship Creed Humphrey because he's big on PFF. It's the most hypocritical art. I'm not even going to get into it. Creed Humphrey is a good center. I honestly don't know why, but the Steelers never really gave him attention anyway. It was obvious they weren't going to draft Humphrey. I don't know why. I don't know if the fabric of the Steelers season came down to them not drafting Creed Humphrey or not. Last night, though, because Creed Humphrey is not a defensive lineman, I would say it really didn't have a whole lot to do with it. They moved the ball eventually offensively. I'm not saying that he's a great player. I'm not even saying he's their center next year. I'm saying that they don't have another option right now, and that's why Green started basically from day one. We'll find out what they do. They've got money in free agency. They're going to have better draft picks than they had last season. They can find another center. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but there's no point in taking him out now. It doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, I'm looking at the remaining of the Steelers season. I think it's going to be really tough. If Derrick Henry does come back, I'm hearing some reports that he may come back.
It was always going to be tough. We knew this.
Yeah, I'm looking at the end of it. I'm trying to see if there's a win I think they can scratch out. If there's one win that they can scratch out, I think it's Cleveland. I think.
And we'll see. They had a week off. They
Yeah.
got a chance to rest up a bit. They were beat up to hell last time they played them, and the Steelers beat them 15-10. Who knows? I mean, it's a toss up. That game being in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh will be favored, but everyone thought it was hilarious that the Vikings were favored by 3.5 last night. Okay, this is the NFL. Not every team is as bad as you think that they are. Vikings are a decent team. They are a 500 level NFL team. So are the Steelers. They just played a close game and call it home field advantage, but the Vikings were able to pull that out. The Vikings aren't going to be favored in any game the rest of the way except for Cleveland. They'll be favored at home against Cleveland. Whether that's 3 points or less, I don't know, but they're going to be favored against Cleveland, barring catastrophic injury on either side.
Before we get out of here, there was one other number I wanted to point out, and you don't see it too often, that Kirk Cousins only had 14 completions, but they scored 36 points, and that's pretty hard to do.
Running the ball
Uh,
helps.
that's pretty hard to do. There were some other things that jumped out. The Vikings averaged nearly 7 yards per play, which was absolutely ridiculous as well. And I know that there was one point, I think in the
It
game
was
in the
like
first
10.
half, they were averaging close to 8 yards of
Yeah.
play, and the Steelers were averaging like 3 yards of play. It was a very disappointing game. Again, in football, you've got to play 4 quarters, and I think when you look at this football team, the inconsistency of both fronts, defensive line and offensive line, I think is the biggest thing in terms of this variance of performance, this high level of variance and this volatility in this particular team because both fronts aren't very good. We're going to leave it with this, Neil. If you're Kevin Colbert, Neil Colbert, or let me call you Colbert, Coulon Colbert. I like that one.
There we
If
go.
you're Coulon Colbert, GM of the Pittsburgh Steelers, what position group are you targeting number one in the first round? Or give me your top three position groups.
Here's the thing. You can't draft positions. You have to draft players. I understand how tempting it is to haul off and address every single position they have, but this is part of sexy tanking, Lance. They addressed certain position groups last year out of necessity. That's why they have their first 4 picks are starting. All right. They're not in that position next year. They have a little bit more flexibility where they can get back to taking talent that matches where they're drafting them. And that isn't to suggest, that they did wrong or anything like that. I think that the guys they drafted were worth the rounds in which they drafted. Not to bring up Creed Humphrey again. The reason they didn't draft Creed Humphrey is because they drafted Pat Freiermuth. Now, I've bagged on Freiermuth. I wasn't all that excited about the pick when they made it. He's proved himself to be a very solid second-round pick. I get that Creed Humphrey is a good player, okay? We can do the hindsight is 2020 thing. The problem is with the argument that everybody makes about Creed Humphrey is they didn't have another pick, okay? What were they supposed to do? You want them to trade up when they have a 5th-round pick that they did trade to get ahead of whoever it was, in the 5th round to get who plays a lot when he's healthy. They have a 7th-round pick who plays a bunch. Their punter was taken in the 6th round. They had so many rookies who had to play this year, they weren't going to be able to get more picks, certainly not in round 2 where they could have drafted Humphrey. You have Freiermuth instead. You can't compare Humphrey to Green. You have to compare him to Freiermuth. That's who they passed on Humphrey for. And I don't have any problem with that. Too many holes for the amount of picks that you had. Too many holes for the amount of money that they had to spend in free agency. That's why they made the decisions that they make. Please stop telling me he's the best player in the league, okay? Please stop telling me that. He's a young player. He's developing like everybody else is. He plays in a completely different offense than the Steelers do. There is an enormous talent level difference between the Chiefs and the Steelers. Do I need to tell anybody that? I shouldn't. The reality is there are a bunch of players who are really good that the Steelers didn't draft. There are a bunch of players, 32 teams in the NFL didn't draft. This is how the draft works. I don't know why you guys think that there is the opportunity to just take as many top 50 players as you can. It doesn't work that way. They have the ability to do that. In the end, though, Lance, this is a part of the sexy tanking edict. More needs than picks. They didn't have the opportunity to address everything. They had to take what they knew. And that was coming off of an evaluation year of very few college games, hidden medical reports, lack of ability to meet with people face to face. They didn't have nearly the amount of resources available to make the decisions that they made. Good for Creed Humphrey. It's great. I thought he was a good player too. I don't know why they didn't draft him. I just know that they absolutely needed a tight end, and you saw why last night. Farman's going to be a good player. That's solid. Okay.
Stop beating up on my guy Wes, Neil.
This argument is so circular. It's the same thing all the time. They didn't have the ability to draft Humphrey and have the team that they needed to build for the future. What would you rather have, a 3-down tight end or a center? I'd rather have a tight end. You're going to be able to find a center. If that's not Green, find somebody else. They can sign a veteran starting center next year. They usually come into the market. It's not rare to find a good center. If that's what they want to do, they absolutely have the ability to do that. Creed Humphrey is not going to be the reason the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Okay,
I think that's the point, is that they actually can move on from Green. He is a 3rd-round pick. They're not tied to him.
Exactly. It's not something they have to do. Plus, we've talked about this a bunch too. He played guard in college more often than anything else. You know what they need next year, Lance?
Guard.
A starting right guard. Maybe that's a draft pick. Maybe that's a veteran. But they've given themselves options along the offensive line that everyone screams about, and everyone thinks magically the answer was the rookie they didn't draft. It's nonsense.
Let's do this. Let's tee this up, Neil, and maybe if he has time, considering you're his jefe, maybe Luke Easterling, who did our draft show earlier this year, maybe he can give us a list of names of guys that we might be excited about. Since we're not going to lock into positions. And I want to give a big shout out to my guy, Jerry Jones, on Instagram. And we're going to try to spotlight some guys and try to maybe put some guys in some buckets. So when we get to the draft, we'll have that prepared for you guys. Because right now, we need
to confirm one thing, though, Lance. The Steelers have draft picks this coming year. Okay. Everyone needs to be aware of that. Taking Najee Harris and that pick and putting it into a vacuum that only exists this year is fundamentally stupid. Okay. They are able to sign offensive linemen next year. They are able to draft offensive linemen next year. You're going to freak out about players who weren't available for them to draft this year. They need to do both. It's always been 2 years. We've said that a bunch. They're probably going to be picking, my opinion. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. That gives them a draft pick no lower than 18. If they continue to lose, that's going to increase. They can address a quarterback if they want. They can address the offensive line if they want. They can address receiver, which I really think that they need to, and wave bye-bye to Claypool. I think they need defensive backs. They don't have a whole lot of those. Although, how about something for Akella Witherspoon last night?
Yeah, he did
pretty
play well.
Not bad. You have to like
sorry
that.
for not pointing him out. He got a couple of interceptions.
The interception that he had, he ran out of gas. Like his batteries died in the middle of it. It's because he hasn't played all year. He doesn't have any conditioning. But that's a player they have control over next year. They can bring him back. He's looked good in the time that they've given him. James Pierre probably needs some more work, but they've got guys.
See, that's a case of our points when we were talking about playing young guys and seeing what you have and guys having reps and so on and so forth, where we took different routes, but it met in the middle. Witherspoon was a case.
Yeah.
And he got some quality snaps and showed his wares in the game. But before we get out of here, Neil, is there anything you want to point to? Because I know, you guys on Steelers Wire have a bit of time in this little 10-day period. I think it's 10 days before the next Steeler game. Are you guys doing anything special that fans should take a look at?
I'm more worried right now about we have some staffing issues that we have to address immediately. In fact, have come up during this show. So I'm off with you and on the phone with my regional editors to go over that. But I would say look at Draft Wire. This is the time of the year where Draft Wire picks up, and I think as far as the Steelers go, there are a lot of options. Luke Easterling, another guy that we're going to get on the show again very soon to discuss options, players who are available, and maybe even address the positions that you guys absolutely need to have addressed. He's going to break that down. He gave him a quarterback. I won't say which one, but check out his mock draft, draftwire.com.
Ooh.
It's a valid argument that he makes for that player. I think that it's there, but overall, I would just say, look, still have a lot of holes, a lot of positions they need to fill. I don't think that they can take in mind that, they're going to be able to draft the greatest player who's ever lived in each round. They're going to have to get good, solid football players and continue to build out the depth that they have. This is not a one-year thing. Where they are right now, Lance, that's exactly what we've been talking about all season. This is going exactly as we predicted it to be. It stings a bit after a terrible first half, after a tough, a fun comeback to watch ended up a little bit short. We get it, but this team is exactly who we thought that they were. Thank you, Denny Green, RIP. And RIP Demaryius Thomas.
Yes, absolutely.
Tragically underrated player who did not ever get nearly the credit that he deserved for the Tebow game. Demaryius Thomas destroyed that team that night, and it had very little to do with Tim Tebow. Thomas took the slant short, outran the Steelers secondary, stiff-armed Ike Taylor, a phenomenal individual play by him. He never got the credit for that. That always bugged me. Demaryius Thomas is one of the more underrated players we've seen in this generation, and clearly a guy who we lost way, way too early.
Yeah, I mean, he was good enough at one point. I think he was the highest paid wide receiver in the National Football League, if I'm not mistaken. So, he was he was an incredible football player. And I'm looking at draftwire.com. I will not give the pick that was made by Luke, but go to draftwire.usa.com, USA Today, .com. Only thing I will tease there is that the Steelers selected 18, which is interesting.
Breaking news, Lance.
Yes.
I have breaking news. Sorry. From Ian Rappaport, Steelers outside linebacker Alex Highsmith, who left last night's game early, is not believed to have suffered a major injury. Sources said he'll have more tests today, but early indications is that it's a bad contusion above the knee. Contusion is a very fancy word for bruise. So he did not tear his knee up, which some people had speculated at the time that might have happened. So some good rest coming for him, 10 days off to ice up and get some flexibility back. Hopefully he is able to go against Tennessee next week.
Real quick before we get out of here, with this break, are the players allowed to go home? Are they allowed to leave Pittsburgh, or do they typically stay in the city during this mini break that they have?
Considering they just lost, I don't think Tomlin's going to let them off. But for the most part, it depends on the team. I think Tomlin will probably give them a day or two, not a whole lot, but take a little bit of time. You have to take advantage of that, especially at the end of the year. It's not a punitive thing, but they like to frame it like a reward if they win that game. So I would say they probably come in for testing today, go over film, everything like that. They might have a walkthrough or two, but give them probably Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, or Saturday through Tuesday off, and then back to work normally on Wednesday.
And in that time, I'm assuming that the coaches are at work getting the game plan together.
Yeah, they'll self-evaluate. They'll look at who they are, where they are, answer a lot of the questions that we discussed in preparation for the offseason. But their job is, make no mistake about this, if they're not eliminated from the playoffs, they're pushing for the playoffs. That's what they want. They don't tank. They're not looking to increase a draft pick 4 spots and act as if that's going to fix everything. Their job is to handle the players who are being paid millions of dollars on their roster right now. They're not letting go of that for the sake of essentially an organized lottery held in April.
I agree with that. I agree with that. We'll see how it all shakes out. Man, after that first half, I thought that was going to happen after Ben kept getting hit. I was like, wow,
he took some shots.
The old man is going to break. But with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the program. I want to thank everybody for hopping on, especially in the West Coast. If you hopped on, it is very early this morning. So thank you for that. Thank you for Neil, as always, for your time, energy, and effort. And Wes thanks you too. He said, for the record, Neil, love your energy, baby. Yes,
love you, Wes.
Wes Hickok. Yes, right. Yes. And with that, we are going to conclude the show. And I wonder if Chase Claypool will ask about what music is played next week at practice. I bet
looking forward to the first person ballsy enough to ask either Chase Claypool or Mike Tomlin about the music again. What was that line that Tomlin said? Somebody asked him something unrelated, and he answered it very short and abrupt, and then paused a beat and then said, we're not going to play music either. It was just fantastic. He's not having that. He
And
didn't
for
want that
all
at all.
if for all my hip hop fans, I'm sure Chase Claypool will not play no Vaseline. But with that, we're going to get out of here. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.